The gunshot echoed through the abandoned warehouse as Carmen Hernandez pressed herself against the cold concrete wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. 7-year-old Aria Rossi clung to her side, trembling but silent, just as Carmen had taught her during their desperate escape from Sergei Fedorov's men. "Where are they?" Sergei's voice cut through the darkness, thick with his Russian accent and barely contained rage. "Find the girl and the waitress now." Carmen closed her eyes, remembering how this nightmare began 3 days ago when she'd found Aria crying in the rain outside Rocco's restaurant. She'd never imagined that comforting a lost child would lead her into the deadly world of Chicago's most feared Mafia boss, Luciano Rossi. She'd certainly never expected to fall for him. But now, as footsteps approached their hiding spot, Carmen knew she'd risk everything again, because somewhere in this city, Luciano was probably tearing apart every building looking for his daughter. And despite everything, the lies, the danger, the impossible gulf between their worlds, Carmen understood one truth with crystal clarity. She loved them both, and she'd die before letting Sergei Fedorov hurt either of them. The footsteps stopped. A flashlight beam swept across the wall, inches from where they hid. "Mama Carmen," Aria whispered, using the name that had slipped out naturally over the past weeks. "Is Papa coming?" Carmen squeezed the little girl tighter, her mind racing through their escape options. "Yes, baby, Papa's coming." Welcome to Passion and Power. You're about to witness a story that will leave you breathless. Comment below which city you're watching from and hit that subscribe button, because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Your support means everything to us, and this tale of forbidden love and dangerous loyalty will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very last second. The lunch rush at Rocco's kitchen in Chicago's Little Italy was brutal, but Carmen Hernandez had survived worse. She balanced 3 plates on her left arm while carrying a steaming pot of coffee, weaving between tables packed with construction workers and office employees seeking authentic Italian comfort food. "Order up," Rocco called from the kitchen, his weathered face glistening with sweat as he slid another plate across the pass. At 62, he still worked every lunch service, claiming his marinara sauce would turn to garbage if he left it to anyone else. Carmen grabbed the plate of chicken parmigiana and delivered it to table 6, forcing a smile despite the exhaustion weighing down her shoulders. She'd been pulling double shifts for 3 weeks straight, trying to scrape together enough money for next month's rent on her studio apartment in Pilsen. The gentrification creeping through her neighborhood meant landlords were doubling rents, pushing out families who'd lived there for generations. "Excuse me, miss." An elderly woman at table 4 waved her over. "Could I get some extra Parmesan cheese?" "Of course, Mrs. Patterson." Carmen had been serving the retired teacher for 2 years now. She knew Mrs. Patterson ordered the same thing every Tuesday, spaghetti carbonara with extra cheese and a side of garlic bread. As Carmen headed to the kitchen, the restaurant's front door chimed. She glanced over automatically, her customer service smile ready, but the words died in her throat. The man who entered commanded attention without saying a word. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than Carmen made in 6 months. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his olive-toned skin spoke of Mediterranean heritage. But it was his eyes that made Carmen's breath catch, dark brown, almost black, scanning the restaurant with the calculating intensity of a predator. Behind him followed 2 other men in expensive suits, their postures alert and protective. The entire restaurant seemed to quiet, conversations dropping to whispers as patrons instinctively recognized danger. "Table for 3? Carmen approached them, her voice steady despite the way her pulse had quickened. She'd grown up in neighborhoods where you learned to read people quickly. This man radiated power and barely contained violence. "Just me," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "Somewhere private." Carmen led him to a corner booth, acutely aware of how his presence seemed to fill the space around them. As he sat down, she noticed his white dress shirt had the top 4 buttons undone, revealing a muscular chest and a discreet tattoo on the side of his neck, elegant script in what looked like Italian. A platinum Rolex caught the light on his wrist as he adjusted his sleeve. "What can I get you?" she asked, pulling out her order pad. His dark eyes studied her face with unsettling intensity. "Coffee, black, and whatever Rocco recommends." Carmen nodded and headed to the kitchen, but she could feel his gaze following her. When she returned with his coffee, he was speaking quietly into his phone. "Don't care what it takes, Angelo. Find him before sunset or—" He looked up as Carmen approached, immediately ending the call. She set down the coffee, noting how his jaw tightened when their fingers accidentally brushed. "Rocco says to try the osso buco. It's his grandmother's recipe." "Fine." He didn't look at the menu, his attention fixed entirely on her. "You're not Italian." It wasn't a question. Carmen straightened her shoulders, recognizing the subtle challenge in his tone. "Mexican-American, born in Chicago, if that matters to you." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe even respect. "It doesn't. You work hard." "I work 3 jobs," Carmen replied, unsure why she was sharing personal information with this dangerous stranger. "Lunch shift here. Evening shift at a diner in Pilsen. Weekend catering gigs when I can get them." 3 jobs. He repeated the words like they were foreign to him. "Why?" Carmen almost laughed at the question. "Because rent doesn't pay itself, and neither does food or utilities. Some of us don't have the luxury of choice." His expression darkened, and Carmen realized she might have overstepped. Men like him, clearly wealthy, obviously powerful, probably weren't used to being challenged by waitresses. But instead of anger, she saw something else in his eyes. Curiosity. "I'll get your food," she said quickly, retreating to the kitchen. "Who's the guy in the corner?" Luce whispered as Carmen waited for the osso buco. Her friend had been working at Rocco's for 5 years and had an uncanny ability to read customers. "No idea, but he's got money and attitude in equal measure. And he's been watching you like a hawk since he sat down," Luce added with a knowing grin. "Maybe he's looking for more than lunch." Carmen shot her a warning look. "Don't even think about it. That man is trouble with a capital T." When she returned with his meal, the stranger was staring out the window at the street. His profile was sharp and aristocratic, but there was something haunted in his expression that made Carmen's chest tighten unexpectedly. "Your food," she said softly. He turned back to her, and for a moment the dangerous mask slipped. She saw exhaustion there, and something that looked almost like loneliness. "Thank you." He paused, waiting. "Carmen. Carmen." The way he said her name, with that slight Italian accent, made her stomach flutter. "I'm Luciano." Just then, Rocco emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. When he saw Luciano, his face went pale. "Mr. Rossi," Rocco said carefully, "I wasn't expecting you." Carmen felt the blood drain from her face. Rossi. She'd heard that name whispered in her neighborhood, always with fear and respect. The Italian family that controlled most of Chicago's underground operations. Luciano's eyes never left Carmen's face as he responded to Rocco. "Just wanted to try the food I've heard so much about." But Carmen knew that was a lie. Men like Luciano Rossi didn't randomly visit neighborhood restaurants. They came for reasons, and now she was terrified to find out what his reason might be. "Everything to your satisfaction?" Rocco asked nervously. "Excellent," Luciano replied, though he'd barely touched his food. "Carmen here has been very attentive." The way he said her name again made her shiver. When Rocco retreated to the kitchen, Luciano leaned back in his seat, studying her. "You're afraid of me now," he observed. Carmen lifted her chin. "Should I be?" "That depends." His fingers drummed against the table, the Rolex catching the light. "Do you make a habit of challenging dangerous men?" "I make a habit of treating everyone with respect until they prove they don't deserve it." A slow smile spread across his face, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. Interesting philosophy. Before Carmen could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from her landlord. Another rent increase notice. Her heart sank as she read the amount. Even with 3 jobs, she'd never make that much. "Problem?" Luciano asked, noticing her expression. Carmen quickly put her phone away. "Nothing I can't handle." But as she walked away to check on other tables, she felt his intense gaze following her every movement, and despite every instinct screaming at her to stay away from Luciano Rossi, she couldn't deny the electric pull she felt toward him. She just had no idea that in 3 hours, His 7-year-old daughter would change both their lives forever. The afternoon rain started just as Carmen's shift was ending. She stood under Rocco's awning, watching the downpour turn the streets into rivers, when she heard it. A small, frightened sob coming from the alley beside the restaurant. Following the sound, Carmen found a little girl huddled behind a dumpster, soaked to the skin and shivering. She had dark hair plastered to her head and enormous brown eyes filled with tears. "Hey, sweetheart," Carmen said gently, crouching down to the child's level. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up at her with those huge eyes. "I can't find my papa," she whispered in accented English. "I was playing in the park and then there were these scary men, and I ran, but now I don't know where I am." Carmen's heart clenched. The child couldn't be more than 7 years old. "What's your name, baby?" "Aria. Aria Rossi." Carmen's blood turned to ice. Rossi, as in Luciano Rossi, who'd been sitting in her restaurant just hours ago. "Okay, Aria. I'm Carmen. Let's get you somewhere warm and dry, and then we'll find your papa, okay?" Aria nodded, allowing Carmen to lift her into her arms. She was so small and light, and Carmen felt a fierce protective instinct surge through her as she carried the child into the restaurant. "Rocco!" Carmen called. "I need towels and hot chocolate." Rocco emerged from the kitchen, took one look at the soaked child in Carmen's arms, and his face went white. "Madonna mia, is that—" "Aria Rossi," Carmen confirmed quietly. "She's lost." Rocco crossed himself. We need to warm her up first," Carmen interrupted firmly. She wasn't about to let anyone use this scared little girl as a pawn in whatever games powerful men played. Carmen wrapped Aria in clean kitchen towels and sat her at a corner booth, bringing her steaming hot chocolate and a plate of Rocco's famous chocolate chip cookies. "Better?" Carmen asked, brushing damp hair from Aria's forehead. Aria nodded, cupping the mug in her small hands. "You're very pretty," she said shyly, "and you smell like flowers." Carmen's heart melted. "Thank you, sweetheart. Can you tell me what happened? How did you get separated from your papa?" "I was at Lincoln Park with Frank, he's papa's friend who watches me sometimes. But Frank had to talk to some men and he told me to stay by the swings. I was being good, I promise. But then these other men came, and they were talking about papa, saying mean things. Frank told me to run and hide, so I did. I ran and ran until I couldn't run anymore." Carmen's stomach clenched. It sounded like some kind of ambush or confrontation. "Do you remember anything about these men? What they looked like?" Aria scrunched up her face, thinking. "One of them had yellow hair and talked funny. Not like Papa or Frank. Different." Russian, Carmen realized with growing dread. She'd heard enough Russian accents in her neighborhood to recognize the description. "Aria, does your papa have a phone number, you know?" The little girl rattled off a number, which Carmen immediately memorized. But before she could decide whether to call, the restaurant's front door burst open. Luciano Rossi strode in like an avenging angel, his hair disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and murder in his dark eyes. Behind him came Angelo and 2 other men Carmen didn't recognize. "Papa!" Aria cried, scrambling out of the booth and running to him. Luciano dropped to his knees, catching his daughter in his arms and holding her so tightly, Carmen thought he might never let go. For a moment, the dangerous Mafia boss disappeared, replaced by a terrified father who thought he'd lost everything. "Aria, mia bambina," he whispered against her hair, his voice breaking. I was so scared." "I'm okay, Papa. Carmen took care of me. She gave me hot chocolate and cookies, and she smells like flowers." Luciano's eyes found Carmen over his daughter's head, and the raw gratitude in them made her chest tight. Slowly, he stood, lifting Aria with him. "Where did you find her?" he asked Carmen, his voice carefully controlled. "In the alley. She was hiding behind the dumpster, soaked and scared." "Frank?" Luciano asked Angelo without taking his eyes off Carmen. "In the hospital," Angelo replied grimly. 3 broken ribs, concussion. He'll live, but barely. Fedorov's men jumped him at the park." Luciano's jaw clenched, and Carmen saw his hands tighten protectively around Aria. "How many?" 4. Frank took down 2 before they got him. Aria ran like he told her to. "Good girl," Luciano murmured to his daughter. You did exactly right. Carmen watched this exchange with growing unease. This was real. The danger, the violence. It wasn't some movie or TV show. This little girl lived in a world where men got beaten unconscious and children had to run for their lives. I want to stay with Carmen, Arya announced suddenly. She's nice, and she makes the scared feeling go away. Luciano's attention snapped back to Carmen, studying her with new intensity. You calmed her down. She was frightened, Carmen said simply. Any child would be. Not any woman would have helped her. Carmen bristled. What kind of person do you think I am? I'm beginning to wonder, Luciano replied quietly. Arya tugged on her father's sleeve. Papa, can Carmen come home with us? Please, I like her. Sweetheart, Carmen has her own life, Luciano began. Actually, Carmen interrupted, surprising herself. I was just about to head to my evening shift, but if Arya needs... No. Luciano's voice was sharp. You've done enough. More than enough. Carmen felt the dismissal like a slap. Of course. She was just the waitress who'd happened to find his daughter. Now that the crisis was over, she could return to her proper place. But Arya wasn't having it. I don't want Carmen to leave, she said, her lower lip trembling. Please, Papa. She makes me feel safe. Carmen saw something crack in Luciano's expression. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and seemed to see something that made his shoulders slump slightly. When was the last time she smiled? Carmen asked quietly, understanding hitting her like a lightning bolt. Luciano's eyes snapped to hers. What? Arya, when was the last time you saw her really smile? Laugh? Act like a normal 7-year-old. The silence that followed was answer enough. She lost her mother 2 years ago, Angelo said quietly, earning a sharp look from Luciano. She's been withdrawn. Quiet. Carmen looked at Arya, who was still clinging to her father, but watching Carmen with hopeful eyes. This wasn't just about today's scare. This was about a little girl who'd been carrying grief and fear for 2 years, living in a world of bodyguards and constant danger. I could, Carmen started, then stopped. What was she thinking? She couldn't get involved with these people. It was insane. You could... What? Luciano asked, his voice dangerously soft. Carmen took a deep breath. I could spend some time with her, not as a job or anything like that, just as a friend, someone normal she could talk to. Absolutely not, Luciano said immediately. It's too dangerous. You don't understand what you're suggesting. I understand that your daughter needs more than bodyguards and fear, Carmen shot back. She needs to feel like a kid sometimes. Luciano stepped closer, and Carmen caught his scent. Expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely masculine that made her pulse race despite the tension. You have no idea what my world is like, he said quietly. The things I've done, the enemies I've made. Getting close to us would put a target on your back. Maybe that should be my choice to make. They stared at each other, the air between them crackling with tension and something else, something that made Carmen's skin flush and her breathing shallow. Please, Papa, Arya whispered. I like Carmen. She's not scared of anything. Luciano looked down at his daughter, then back at Carmen. You're making a mistake. Probably, Carmen agreed. But I'm making it anyway. Something shifted in Luciano's expression, surprise, maybe even admiration. You're either very brave or very foolish. Why can't I be both? Despite everything, Luciano's mouth quirked upward slightly. Angelo will drive you home. We'll discuss this tomorrow. As Angelo led Carmen toward the door, Arya called out, Carmen, will you really come see me? Carmen turned back, seeing the hope shining in those dark eyes. I promise, sweetheart. But as she walked out into the rain, Carmen couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped off a cliff. She was falling into Luciano Rossi's dangerous world, and she had no idea if there would be anything to catch her when she hit bottom. Carmen had expected many things when she arrived at the address Angelo had given her the next evening. She hadn't expected to feel like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. The Rossi mansion in Lincoln Park was a monument to wealth and power. 3 stories of limestone and marble that probably cost more than her entire neighborhood. As she stood at the massive front door, Carmen almost turned around and ran. But then the door opened, and Arya launched herself into Carmen's arms. "You came. You really came." The little girl's joy was infectious, and Carmen felt her nervousness melt away. "I promised, didn't I?" Carmen hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of expensive children's shampoo and something uniquely Arya. Miss Hernandez. Luciano appeared in the doorway, and Carmen's breath caught. Gone was the expensive suit. Instead, he wore dark jeans and a white dress shirt with, as seemed to be his signature, the top 4 buttons undone. The casual look somehow made him even more devastating. "Carmen," she corrected automatically. "Just Carmen." His dark eyes studied her face. "Carmen, thank you for coming." Arya grabbed Carmen's hand and tugged her inside. The foyer alone was larger than Carmen's entire apartment, with a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than she made in a year. "Come see my room," Arya demanded, pulling Carmen toward a sweeping staircase. "Arya," Luciano's voice held gentle warning. "Let Carmen catch her breath first." But Carmen was already following the excited 7-year-old up the stairs, marveling at the oil paintings and antique furniture that lined the hallway. Arya's room was a princess fantasy in pink and gold, with a canopy bed and enough toys to stock a small store. "This is beautiful, sweetheart," Carmen said, sitting on the bed as Arya showed her various dolls and books. "Mama picked out most of it," Arya said quietly, "before she went to heaven." Carmen's heart clenched. "Tell me about your mama." Arya climbed onto the bed beside her, cuddling close in a way that made Carmen's maternal instincts surge. "She was really pretty like you, and she smelled good like you. She used to read to me every night and sing Italian songs. Do you remember any of the songs?" Arya nodded and began humming a soft melody. Her voice was sweet and clear, but there was a sadness in it that no 7-year-old should carry. "That's beautiful," Carmen said softly. "Your mama had good taste in music." "Papa doesn't sing anymore," Arya confided. "He used to before Mama died. Now he just works all the time and looks sad." Carmen glanced toward the doorway, where she could sense rather than see Luciano listening. Sometimes when people are very sad, they forget how to do happy things, but that doesn't mean they don't love you. "I know Papa loves me," Arya said matter-of-factly, "but I think he's lonely. Are you lonely, Carmen?" The innocent question hit Carmen like a punch to the chest. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Maybe you and Papa could be lonely together, then you wouldn't be lonely anymore." Before Carmen could figure out how to respond to that bit of 7-year-old logic, Luciano appeared in the doorway. "Arya, why don't you show Carmen your art supplies? I thought maybe you two could draw together." Arya's face lit up, and she scrambled to a corner of the room where an easel and art table were set up. As she gathered supplies, Luciano moved closer to Carmen. "She hasn't talked about her mother like that in months," he said quietly. "Usually she just shuts down when anyone mentions Adriana." Carmen could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell that intoxicating scent of expensive cologne and male skin. She needs to talk about her. Keeping grief locked inside isn't healthy for anyone, especially a child. "You sound like you speak from experience." Carmen met his gaze steadily. "I lost my parents when I was 12. Car accident. I went to live with my grandmother, but she didn't like talking about sad things. I learned to keep it all inside." Something shifted in Luciano's expression, understanding, maybe even sympathy. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, but I remember what it felt like to have no one to talk to about them." "Carmen, look!" Arya called from her art table. "I'm drawing you!" Carmen moved to look over Arya's shoulder, laughing at the stick figure with long dark hair and a big smile. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. Am I really that tall?" "You're the tallest lady I know," Arya said seriously, "except in your heart. In your heart, you're just the right size for hugs." Carmen felt tears prick her eyes at the innocent wisdom. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. They spent the next hour drawing and coloring, with Arya chattering about school, her friends, and her favorite books. Carmen was amazed by how bright and articulate the little girl was, and how starved she seemed for normal, feminine attention. "Are you hungry?" Luciano asked eventually. I thought we could order dinner. Can we have pizza? Arya asked hopefully. Carmen, do you like pizza? I love pizza, Carmen assured her. But not the fancy kind Papa usually gets, Arya continued. The kind with lots of cheese and pepperoni that you eat with your hands. Carmen caught Luciano's amused expression. I think I can manage that, he said dryly. As they headed downstairs, Carmen noticed framed photographs lining the hallway. Luciano with a beautiful woman, who must have been Adriana, family gatherings, Arya as a baby. But she also noticed that many of the photos looked like they'd been taken down recently, leaving faint outlines on the wallpaper. In the kitchen, which was larger than most restaurant kitchens Carmen had worked in, Luciano ordered pizza, while Arya showed Carmen her collection of refrigerator art. She's very talented, Carmen told Luciano as Arya ran to wash her hands. She gets that from her mother, he replied, his voice carefully neutral. Carmen studied his profile as he leaned against the marble counter. It's okay to miss her, you know, and it's okay for Arya to see that you miss her. His jaw tightened. Arya doesn't need to see me fall apart. There's a difference between falling apart and grieving. Right now, you're teaching her that love ends when someone dies. That's not true, is it? Luciano turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Carmen stepped closer, feeling bold. You've put away all the photos, stopped talking about Adriana, probably stopped doing anything that reminds you of her. You think you're protecting Arya, but you're actually teaching her that the people we love just disappear. And what would you have me do? His voice was dangerously quiet. Break down crying in front of my 7-year-old daughter. I'd have you remember that love doesn't end with death. I'd have you tell Arya stories about her mother. I'd have you keep some photos up so she knows it's okay to remember. They were standing close now, close enough that Carmen could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, could feel the tension radiating from his powerful frame. "Do you think it's that simple?" he asked. "I think it's that necessary." Before Luciano could respond, Arya bounced back into the kitchen. "Is the pizza here yet? I'm starving." "Soon, bambina," Luciano said, his voice immediately gentle as he turned to his daughter. The pizza arrived 20 minutes later, and they ate at the kitchen island like a normal family. Carmen watched Luciano with Arya. How patient he was, how he listened to her chatter about school with genuine interest, how he automatically cut her pizza into smaller pieces and made sure she had enough to drink. "Papa," Arya said around a bite of pizza, "can Carmen come to my school play next week? We're doing Cinderella and I'm playing a mouse." Carmen saw Luciano tense. "Sweetheart, Carmen has her own job." "I'd love to come," Carmen interrupted. "If it's okay with your papa." Arya clapped her hands excitedly. "It's on Thursday at 7. Will you really come?" "I promise." After dinner they moved to the living room, another showcase of wealth and taste, with Persian rugs and antique furniture that looked like museum pieces. Arya curled up between Carmen and Luciano on the massive sofa, insisting that Carmen read her a bedtime story. As Carmen read about princesses and fairy godmothers, she was acutely aware of Luciano beside her. His presence was magnetic, dangerous, and increasingly irresistible. When their hands accidentally touched as they both reached to turn a page, the spark of electricity was undeniable. "Time for bed, Arya," Luciano said when the story ended. "Can Carmen tuck me in?" Arya asked hopefully. Carmen looked to Luciano, who nodded slightly. Upstairs, as Carmen helped Arya into her pajamas and brushed her teeth, the little girl chattered about everything and nothing. "Carmen," Arya said as Carmen tucked her into the canopy bed. "Do you think Mama would like you?" The question caught Carmen off guard. I hope so, sweetheart." "Why?" "Because I think she sent you to take care of us. Papa's been so sad, and I've been sad too. But when you're here, the sad feeling goes away." Carmen's throat tightened. "Oh, sweetheart, will you come back tomorrow?" "I have to work tomorrow night, but maybe I could come by after school, if your papa says it's okay." Arya's smile was radiant. "I love you, Carmen." The simple declaration hit Carmen like a lightning bolt. "I love you too, baby girl." As Carmen headed back downstairs, She found Luciano waiting in the foyer, his expression unreadable. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I haven't seen her this happy in a long time. She's an amazing little girl. You're doing a good job with her." "Am I?" His voice held doubt. "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing her every day." Carmen stepped closer, drawn by the vulnerability in his voice. "You're not failing her. You're grieving. There's a difference." "Is there?" His dark eyes searched her face. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple. It's the hardest thing in the world. But Arya needs to see that it's possible to love someone who's gone and still be happy again." "And you think that's possible? Being happy again?" The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Carmen was suddenly very aware of how close they were standing, of the way Luciano's eyes had dropped to her lips. "I think," she said softly, "that happiness finds us in the most unexpected places." Carmen. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a warning all at once. "I should go," she said quickly, stepping back before she did something foolish like reach for him. "Angela will drive you home." "I can take the bus." "No." His voice brooked no argument. "It's late, and this neighborhood. Angelo will drive you." As they waited for Angelo to bring the car around, Luciano caught her hand. "Carmen, what you're doing for Arya, I can't repay that." "I'm not doing it for repayment." "Then why?" Carmen looked up at him, seeing past the dangerous exterior to the lonely, grieving man underneath. "Because she needs it, and maybe you both do." The ride home was quiet, but Carmen's mind was racing. She was falling for them, both of them, the sweet, lonely little girl and her complex, dangerous father. And that terrified her more than any threat from his enemies ever could, because she was starting to realize that Luciano Rossi might just be worth the risk. Carmen should have known that happiness in Luciano's world came with a price. She'd been spending time with Arya for 2 weeks, helping with homework, attending the school play, teaching her to braid friendship bracelets. The little girl was blossoming, laughing more, talking about her mother with joy instead of just sadness. And Luciano. Luciano was watching Carmen with an intensity that made her skin burn and her heart race. But she should have remembered that men like Luciano Rossi had enemies, and those enemies didn't care about collateral damage. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night. Carmen was dead asleep in her studio apartment when her phone rang with an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered groggily. "Carmen Hernandez." The voice was cold, accented, Russian. "You have something that belongs to me." Carmen sat up, instantly alert. "Who is this?" "My name is Sergei Fedorov, and you, little waitress, have made a very big mistake." Ice flooded Carmen's veins. She'd heard that name whispered in the same fearful tones as Rossi. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? You've been playing house with Luciano Rossi's daughter. Very touching. Very vulnerable. If you hurt Arya—" "Hurt her?" Sergei laughed, the sound like broken glass. "Why would I hurt her when she's so much more valuable alive? Children make such excellent leverage." Carmen was already pulling on clothes, her mind racing. "What do you want?" "Rossi has something of mine. A shipment that went missing from the docks last week. He has 24 hours to return it, or the little girl disappears forever." "You're insane if you think—" "I'm practical," Sergei cut her off. "And you, Carmen, are going to deliver my message, because if you don't, well, let's just say that pretty little apartment of yours isn't nearly as secure as you think it is." The line went dead. Carmen's hands shook as she called Luciano's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried Angelo's number. Same thing. Growing panic clawed at her chest as she threw on shoes and grabbed her keys. She had to get to the mansion, had to warn them. But when she arrived at Lincoln Park 20 minutes later, the house was dark and silent. Too silent. Carmen's blood turned to ice as she noticed the front door standing slightly ajar. "Luciano," she called softly, pushing the door open. "Arya." Silence. She found signs of a struggle in the living room, overturned furniture, broken glass from a shattered vase. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Too late. The girl is safe. For now. Carmen sank onto the sofa, her legs giving out. They had Arya. Sergei Fedorov had taken that sweet, innocent little girl, and it was all Carmen's fault. If she hadn't gotten involved, if she hadn't made herself a target. "Carmen?" She spun around to find Luciano standing in the doorway, his white dress shirt torn and bloody, his face a mask of controlled rage. "Oh, God!" she breathed, running to him. "Are you hurt? Where's Aria? I got a call. She's gone." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Fedorov's men took her 2 hours ago." Carmen reached for him, but he stepped back, his dark eyes cold as winter. "This is your fault," he said quietly. The words hit her like physical blows. "Luciano, I told you it was dangerous. I told you that getting close to us would put a target on your back. But you didn't listen, did you? You had to play the hero. I was trying to help." "Help?" He laughed bitterly. "You made my daughter a target. Fedorov took her because he knew she mattered to you, because he knew that hurting her would hurt me through you." Carmen felt tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But we have to find her." "We?" Luciano stepped closer, and Carmen saw the killer in his eyes. "There is no we, Carmen. There never was. You're a waitress from Pilsen who got in over her head. This is my world, my war, my daughter. She loves me," Carmen whispered, "and I love her." "Love?" Luciano's voice was savage. "You think love matters in this? You think your feelings mean anything when my daughter is in the hands of a psychopath?" Carmen flinched as if he'd struck her. "I know you're scared." "I'm not scared," he snarled. "I'm furious. At Fedorov, at myself, and at you. Because I let this happen. I let you get close, let Aria get attached, and now she's paying the price. Luciano, please, get out." His voice was deadly quiet. "Get out of my house, out of my life, and stay away from my family." "You don't mean that, don't I?" He pulled out his phone and showed her the screen, a photo of Aria tied to a chair, tears streaming down her face. "This is what your help got us. My 7-year-old daughter, terrified and alone because I was stupid enough to let you matter." Carmen stared at the photo, her heart shattering. Aria looked so small, so scared, and it was her fault. All of it. "I'll find her," she whispered. "No, you won't. You'll go back to your apartment, pack your things, and disappear. Because if I see you again, if you interfere in this in any way, I'll forget that you once meant something to me." The threat was clear, and Carmen knew he meant every word. She looked at this man she'd fallen in love with, this dangerous, broken, furious man, and saw nothing but ice in his eyes. "I love you," she said desperately. "Both of you. That has to count for something." For just a moment, something flickered in his expression. Pain, maybe even regret, but then the mask slammed back down. "Love isn't enough," he said coldly. It never was. Carmen ran then, stumbling out of the mansion and into the night, Luciano's words echoing in her head. But as she reached her car, she made a decision that would either save them all or get her killed. She wasn't giving up on Aria, and she wasn't giving up on Luciano, even if he'd given up on her, because sometimes love meant fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves, even if they hated you for it, especially then. Carmen had exactly 12 hours before Sergei Fedorov's deadline, and she was going to use every one of them. She started with Luz, who had connections throughout Chicago's immigrant communities, connections that often knew things the police never would. "You're crazy," Luz said, as they sat in her kitchen at 4 a.m., drinking strong coffee and making plans. "Completely, totally insane." "Probably," Carmen agreed. "But I can't just sit here while that little girl is scared and alone. And you can't just walk into a Russian mob stronghold and expect to walk out alive." Carmen had been thinking about that. Maybe I don't have to walk out alive. Maybe I just have to get Aria out. "Carmen, no." Luz grabbed her hands. "Listen to me. I know you love that little girl, but this isn't some movie. These people kill for a living. Then I guess I better be smarter than they are." It took 6 hours and every favor Luz had ever earned, but they finally got a location, an abandoned warehouse in Cicero, heavily guarded and perfect for keeping someone hidden. Carmen spent another hour gathering supplies, pepper spray, a knife, her grandmother's rosary, and the burner phone she'd bought with cash. She left a letter for Luz just in case and headed for Cicero. The warehouse district was a maze of empty buildings and broken dreams. Carmen parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, using the shadows and her knowledge of urban exploration to get close. She counted 6 guards outside, all armed, all alert. Getting in would be impossible. Unless she didn't try to sneak in at all. Carmen walked straight up to the front entrance, hands visible, heart hammering against her ribs. "I'm Carmen Hernandez," she told the surprised guard. "Sergei Fedorov is expecting me." 5 minutes later, she was standing in a cavernous space filled with shipping containers and the smell of rust and fear. Sergei Fedorov sat behind a makeshift desk, like a king holding court, his pale eyes studying her with predatory interest. "The little waitress," he said in accented English. "How unexpected." "I want to see Aria," Carmen said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Of course you do." Sergei gestured, and one of his men dragged Aria out from behind a container. The little girl looked exhausted and terrified, but unharmed. When she saw Carmen, her face lit up with desperate hope. "Carmen, you came." "I'm here, baby," Carmen said, her heart breaking. "Everything's going to be okay." "How touching," Sergei drawled. "But I'm afraid you're too late. Rossi has 30 minutes to deliver my property, or the child dies." "What property?" Carmen demanded. "What's worth a little girl's life?" Sergei's smile was cold as winter. 50 kilos of pure heroin, street value of about $10 million. It went missing from my shipment last week, and I have it on good authority that Rossi's men were responsible. Carmen's mind raced. "And if he gives it back? Then perhaps I let the child live, perhaps." "That's not good enough." Sergei raised an eyebrow. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate, little waitress." "Aren't I?" Carmen pulled out her phone. "Because I think you're forgetting something important." "And what's that?" "I'm not just some random waitress anymore. I'm the woman Luciano Rossi loves, and if you kill his daughter, if you hurt her in any way, he won't just come for you with guns and soldiers." Carmen stepped closer, letting every ounce of her fury show in her voice. "He'll come for you with everything he has, every alliance, every favor, every drop of blood and violence in his body. He'll tear this city apart brick by brick until he finds you, and when he does, death will be a mercy you'll beg for." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Sergei's pale eyes. "But," Carmen continued, "if you let Aria go now, if you walk away from this, maybe you live to see another sunrise." "You think I'm afraid of Rossi?" "I think you should be, because a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous enemy you can make." Sergei was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he laughed. "You know what, little waitress? I like you. You have. How do you say balls?" His expression hardened. "But not enough to save you." He nodded to his men, and Carmen saw guns being drawn. This was it. She was going to die in this warehouse, and Aria would still be trapped. But then the lights went out. In the darkness that followed, Carmen heard gunshots, shouts in Russian and Italian, and the sound of a war erupting around them. She dropped to the ground, crawling toward where she'd last seen Aria. "Carmen," Aria's voice, terrified but close. "I'm here, baby. Stay down. Stay quiet." Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in hellish red shadows. Carmen could see men fighting, could smell gunpowder and blood. And through it all, moving like an avenging angel, was Luciano. He was magnificent and terrifying. A white dress shirt stained with blood, his face a mask of controlled violence as he cut through Sergei's men with surgical precision. Behind him came Angelo and Frank, who was moving stiffly but was very much alive. Carmen grabbed Aria and pulled her behind a shipping container, just as Luciano cornered Sergei near the back of the warehouse. "You took my daughter," Luciano said, his voice carrying clearly through the chaos. "Business?" Sergei replied, but Carmen could hear the fear in his voice now. "No," Luciano said quietly. "This was personal. You made it personal when you touched my family. Your drugs for your daughter. That was the deal. The deal's off." Carmen heard 2 gunshots, then silence. "Carmen," Luciano's voice, desperate now. "Carmen, where are you?" "Here!" She stood up, lifting Aria with her. "We're here!" Luciano ran to them, dropping to his knees and pulling them both into his arms. Carmen felt him shaking as he held them, felt the wetness on his cheek that might have been tears. "I thought I'd lost you both," he whispered. "I thought I was too late." "Papa," Arya said, her voice muffled against his chest. "Carmen came to save me. She was so brave." Luciano pulled back to look at Carmen, his dark eyes intense with emotion. "You came for her." "Of course I did. I told you to stay away. I said horrible things." "You were scared," Carmen said simply, "and you were trying to protect her the only way you knew how." "I was wrong." His voice broke slightly. "About everything. About you, about us. About what love means." "Luciano, I love you," he said fiercely. "I love you, and I was a fool to think I could push you away to keep you safe. You're not safe anywhere without me, and I'm not whole without you." Carmen felt tears streaming down her face. "I love you too, both of you, so much." "Marry me," he said suddenly. Carmen blinked. "What?" "Marry me. Be Arya's mother, be my wife, be part of this family for real. I don't want to spend another day without you." "Papa's right," Arya piped up. "We need you. We're not a real family without you." Carmen looked at this man and this little girl who had become her whole world, and she knew there was only one answer. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, yes." Luciano kissed her then, right there in that warehouse surrounded by the aftermath of violence, and Carmen tasted love and hope and the promise of forever. "I don't need help," Luciano murmured against her lips. "I need you. There's a difference." "Good," Carmen replied, smiling through her tears, "because you're stuck with me now." As Angelo and Frank secured the scene, as sirens wailed in the distance, as the dangerous world of the Chicago underworld continued to spin around them, Carmen held her new family close and knew that sometimes the most unexpected love was worth any risk. Even if it came with a side of danger and a man who looked devastating in a blood-stained white shirt. Years later, Carmen would look back on that warehouse as the place where their real life began. The wedding was small and perfect, just family and close friends in the garden of the Lincoln Park mansion. Arya served as maid of honor, beaming in her pink dress as she watched her father marry the woman who had become her mother in every way that mattered. Luciano kept his promise to change. The Rossi family's operations gradually shifted from the shadows into legitimate businesses, restaurants, real estate, security consulting. He would always be a powerful man, would always command respect and inspire a little fear, but the violence was behind them. Carmen continued working, but now she managed a chain of authentic Mexican-Italian fusion restaurants that had become the most popular spots in Chicago. She and Rocco had become partners, bringing together their shared love of food and family. Arya thrived. She was still the sweet, intelligent girl she'd always been, but now she laughed freely, talked about her mother Adriana with joy instead of just sadness, and had gained a little brother, Matteo, who adored his big sister and his fierce, loving mama. On quiet Sunday mornings, Carmen would find Luciano in the kitchen making espresso, his white dress shirt casually unbuttoned, his platinum Rolex catching the morning light, that elegant tattoo on his neck, a reminder of the dangerous man he'd once been. But when he looked at her with those dark eyes full of love and contentment, she saw only her husband, her partner, her home. "Any regrets?" he would ask sometimes, pulling her close. "Only one," Carmen would reply, making him tense until she smiled. "I regret that it took us so long to find each other." And in the laughter of their children, in the warmth of their home, in the strength of a love that had survived violence and fear, and the impossible odds of two different worlds colliding, they had built something beautiful, something worth every risk they'd taken to get there. And that's how love conquered all here at Passion and Power. Sometimes the most dangerous men make the most devoted husbands, and sometimes a waitress with a brave heart is exactly what a broken family needs. Did this story leave you breathless? Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment, and don't forget to subscribe for more heart-stopping romance stories that will keep you coming back for more.